In any life, we have highs and lows, light and dark, wins and losses. What happens when we encounter that moment in time when what happens next could change everything? Join us as we step into another person's inspirational moment and see how we can connect their experience to ours. This is Greg Stevens, and you're listening to A Shot of Inspiration. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of A Shot of Inspiration. I'm Greg Stevens, your host. And today I have a person that I met this last, I guess it was in January, first week of January in Sedona. My wife went with another couple, Matt Jones and his wife, Diana. We went up to Sedona and we went into a little shop where this person was reading auras, and we were doing some other things in there, and my wife had it done, and I thought it was so interesting. So I had mine done, and this is Janice Woods, who's with us. She read my aura, and it was pretty interesting. I'd never had my aura read, but she was spot on with everything she talked about, but it led into a deeper conversation. And I got to know Janice a little. And as I talked to her, I thought, I really want to have you on my podcast. And she said she would like to be on, but we've had reschedule several times. And I'm so glad we got her here, because as we were preparing just a moment ago, I got to know her even a little better. And so I think she's got some amazing stories for you. So Janice, thank you so much for being on the show. Yeah. Janice, what I would like to do is tell people where we met. Well, I don't remember the name of the place where we were. And then I'm going to go back into your life and talk about some of the struggles you've been in to try to get where you are today, because I see you as very successful. You've got a new business you've started. You're very deep spiritually centered from what I have experienced of you. And I think you've really got a message out there for people. So walk us through a little about where we met, and then let's go into your life a little.
Okay. So we met while I was working at Sedona Healing Arts, and that is a healing center with Insight in Sedona. And when we met, I joined in late 2021. So I've been there for a little bit over a year. And I joined because it was time for me to get into my spiritual purpose. Before, I spent nearly, I hate to say this, but almost 30 years in the corporate America. It's like, how do you say 3 decades?
It goes by quick too, doesn't it?
Yes, in corporate America. And then all of a sudden, there were some changes going on with COVID. And then the spirit just told me it was time. And prior to that, I was in the hospital with my nephew who has cerebral palsy, and I was praying over him. And then, as I was, a voice from heaven came to me and said, "You know, you're a healer, and you can help heal your nephew." And I was like, "Whoa!" And then I said, "Okay." And then I also felt that the spirit would tell me, because I was just like, how am I supposed to heal? And the spirit said, when you're ready, we'll tell you. So then right before COVID hit is when changes were going on in my corporate business and my corporate life. And then that's when I heard the voice say, okay, it's time. And that's what led me to Sedona and to doing some studying with spirituality, understanding spirituality a little bit differently than I was raised. And then just taking the leap and coming here, moving, and then doing the work, which really came so naturally, because all I do is turn off my ego side and just become a vessel to let the spirit tell me what I need to tell people. Because just like you, I don't know anybody. I didn't know anybody that was coming into the store, and I had to do these readings for them. And I had to just trust what the energy was telling me and what I was feeling to convey to the people. And then I'm still learning. I'm still growing and learning and healing internally myself, and then being able to trust. I can trust what I hear about other people because it's not about me. But when it is about me and what I need to do, it's a little bit harder. So it's just really becoming more like honest with myself, and trusting the energy and trusting the spirit and trusting that we're more than just physical beings, that we're spiritual beings, and that we need I always call it spirit tribe, need the help of our spirit tribe to just accomplish the purpose that we set for ourselves even before we were born.
That's unbelievable. And that's beautiful because I think it's something you grow into accepting. You grow into, I found for me, is the deeper my spirituality goes, the more I have to release and let go and let spirit come and take things. So let's go back into, you weren't always here. What led you to this? Tell us a little about your corporate work, some of the barriers you ran into, because that's what I love about this podcast is that I want to talk about those things that you didn't even know were there sometimes. And sometimes you look back, how did I get past that? Let's talk about some of those things, because you're a Black woman in corporate America. What was that like when you first stepped in? Because you were there almost 30 years. So let's talk a little about that journey.
Yeah, so shortly after college, I graduated out of college in 1992.
Okay.
So that was in the midst of kind of a recession. So it was hard to find a job for a lot of people. I ended up taking on a job at Sprint when Sprint was a long distance phone company. So I was doing customer service, but I had a communications, a public relations degree. So I was just like, let's just be a stepping stone. So I was there for about a year. And then within Sprint, they had acquired a cellular company and it was called Centel Cellular. So I was in Chicago. So this was outside of Chicago. And I applied for a job as an employee communications specialist and was able to transfer there within a year. So it was really a blessing that I was able to get into my profession very early in my career. But it was tough because as a Black woman, and I hadn't really faced a lot of racism or a lot of, I want to say, just differences within different cultures, because I was raised in an all Black community. I went to a college that was an all Black school. So I just really didn't have the exposure to different cultures to really understand what it was really like. So my first job in this environment, it really exposed me to all these different cultures, different backgrounds, and racism, and I would say sexism as well, and ageism, and all of it, because you're young, you're different. So it's just, I can't necessarily say that one particular thing led to my struggles, but it was also just me being fresh and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not understanding all of what I needed to learn as well. So it's just, the first part of my career was a definitely learning experience, like learning because I was a writer and I was an events planner. I had so many different roles in my first job. I would say just getting to understand what my role is and how to interpret the way that people interacted with me. Because I cried so much. I was just like, one thing that I felt very uncomfortable with, but I couldn't control, are the tears. And when you're in corporate America, you're not supposed to be emotional. You're not supposed to have tears. So it's just like I'm having these tough conversations with my managers about not being as good as a writer or good as a whatever it was that I was doing. And then my heart was broken. I was like, oh, I just don't know what to do. But I had to still be myself. I didn't get fired or anything. I stayed, or I didn't even quit. I just stayed in the job so I can learn and I can grow. And then opportunities started opening up for me, because I also had to fight, because then when you're young and you're vulnerable, then you're targeted to say, okay, I never knew that companies, there's an organization, there had to be one person who didn't do so well. So they used to pick who's going to be that person who's going to get the lower than expected review, so we don't have to give them a raise. And they picked me for once to do that. And that was a year that my boss was out of pocket from an emotional perspective, and I had to pick up the slack for him. And even though I didn't know his job completely, I worked very hard to do it. And I was like, you can't give me a lower than expectation for all the work that I did. And I had to prove myself. I worked that night. I went home and I just wrote my case, and I presented it to my boss's boss, and they had to change it. And then I got my raise.
Yeah.
But it was just learning how to fight and
Yeah.
not just accept what people are going to say when you know you put in the work to even just to make do when it's needed, or to be there for people who need you. Nothing is perfect. Perfection is no such thing. I don't know where that word came from, but there's no such thing as perfection. You just have to do the best that you can.
Let me ask you, on that fight you had, how's that helped you later in life?
It helped me know that to not believe everything that people say about you, or not to embody what people's perception of you are. If you have strength and you have confidence in yourself, it doesn't hurt to fight for it, because the worst they can say is no. And
Right.
and then the best you can say for yourself is that I've tried and I did what I needed to do to overcome, or to not let them put me in a box, or let them tell me that I wasn't good enough,
Right.
or I was below what they've expected me. For me, I was like, no, I gave you guys 120% of what I had in me to make things work. So yeah, that's what I've learned. And sometimes I gave up the fight. We're all just humans, and we just have to learn. I have to say too, throughout my career, one thing even before I started working as a child, I come from a family of five and I'm the youngest, and I'm actually a twin. So I have a twin sister who's a few minutes older than I am. So I was the youngest.
Identical or identical?
Mhm. No, we're
Identical.
fraternal.
Fraternal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just even just dealing with the day to day in the household, and all the needs of all the kids in the house, or the struggle of the parent in the house. Because my mom, by the time we were three, our dad left, and it was just my mom taking care of us. And she went back to school to get a degree so she can take care of us financially. So it's just watching her struggle, watching how she changed her life to make it better for us. So it's just like watching. I was a watcher. I looked at everybody and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. So it's just like learning from other people's experiences too. I feel like that was important for me, because I saw what worked for other people, and I was like, it could or couldn't work for me, but I said, I'm not going to even try, because I see what came out of it for them.
What you're saying is that struggle taught you so much. And then I was going to ask you about any mentors, but you mentioned your mother right away.
Yeah.
And to me, what she did was such an amazing example for you at a young age. Let me ask you, what other mentors along the way, or people who helped you? Because I don't think we make it alone. I think we make it with people, but especially with what you ran into, a new form of understanding about racism, sexism, ageism, all the different biases that people have, judgments that they have. Who helped you along the way?
Yeah, there are so many. That particular job at Sprint, I'm naming that because that was like 30, 40 years ago. They're a completely different company
Yeah.
now. But there was a woman there who saw, she was just watching all of what was happening. And I would say she was younger, like maybe 1 or 2 years younger than me. But she was in the same department, but she had a lot more control and say as far as who did what. So she actually helped get me out of that role, and they had a loan executive program where they would take a corporate professional and put them in a non-for-profit business for a year. And then they'll pay your salary, you'll still have your vacation, but all your time is going to this non-for-profit. So she had asked me if I wanted to do it, and she actually got executives to say, okay. So I actually left that company for a year after all that trauma, and worked for a whole year at a non-for-profit in Chicago. And actually, it was such a blessing, because I was able to do PR work for them and get them seen, I had them in the newspaper. So I was able to tap into a different side of me with a lot more freedom, and then help out the community. And actually met, and this was before Barack was even considering becoming president. But I met him and I met Michelle, because Michelle was the executive director of that organization right before I joined it. It was such a very great experience. So I have to give that woman, her name was Joby Peterson, some credit for really helping me change my life in a sense by sending me to that.
That's
to that
beautiful.
non-for-profit organization.
I love that. And we
Yeah.
even talked earlier, we were talking about when you went to another company, everyone thought you were not in your job in communications, that you were an executive assistant because of your color.
Right. And so when I left that non-for-profit, that's when I joined that other company. It was a professional services global company. I actually applied it from an ad that I saw in a newspaper, and it took probably 6 months for me to get hired. But once I finally joined the company, people thought I was an executive assistant. They didn't think that I was a professional writer, because that's what I got hired for. So I would go walk down the hall and people would say things to me or ask for things from me that was from a role of an executive assistant.
Right.
I just realized there were other people of color working for the organization, but I was in the marketing department. And then when I realized that I was the only Black woman in that department that wasn't an EA, people just didn't know. And then when they realized, it was still a really weird type of interaction that people had with me. But I ended up staying with the company for 8 years, and I got promoted, and I was able to have really high recognition there, because later, after I left, I came back as a contractor. I had started my own internal communications business, and I was working as a contractor, and I had other subcontractors under me doing projects for the marketing and communications company. And I do have some really key, like several role models and people there that really helped me develop a good reputation, and was very supportive in my career there.
So that's your corporate life and some of the struggles you went into.
Yeah.
How did you get into healing from that? So walk me through that little piece.
Yeah. So I was with that company for 8 years, and then I started my own employee communications business, and I did that for 13, 14 years. And I set some goals for myself. I said, all right, this is what I want to accomplish from a financial perspective. And probably in 2008, 17, 18, I reached the goal. So after I reached the goal, it was just doing the work and me trying to figure out what was next. That company was my biggest client. I had other clients, but they were the money makers. All of the subcontractors mainly worked for that particular company. Then in 2019, right before COVID, I was in the summer, I was trying to figure out, is this what I really want to do? I was very worried about the people who were working under me, because it was their livelihood. It was their full-time jobs. I was just like, I want to end this, but I don't know how that's going to work. And it was maybe 2018 when I had that thought. And then 2019, and I want to say this is how manifestation works, because I was like, I'm done, but I want my people to be taken care of. So then the company said, all right, they called me and they were like, we're not going to renew your contract for the next year, but we are going to keep you and all of your contractors. So what you're going to do, because I was such a small company, I didn't have any of the certifications or anything. So they said, what we'll do is transfer all of you guys, including you, to work for another contracting company, and you can keep your same rates, you can keep your same pay, everything stays the same. It's just that it's no longer your company, so that we're working for another organization. And I was just like, wow, everybody's taken care of and I can get out of this. So I finished up my contract for the people I was working with. And then I just took a break. During that whole time, the spirit told me, it's time. I got room from when I said earlier. So that was when I got the message that it was time to do the spiritual work. And I'm just like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. Should I be a coach? How? Because I wasn't going to go to the church. I was not into my basis Christianity, but I don't consider myself like institutionalized with it.
Right.
So it's
Right.
more very spiritual for me. So I
Mhm.
knew I didn't want to get into that again. So I just asked God, what am I going to do?
Right.
And so he said, we'll be here with you, but just check it out there. But he wasn't going to tell me how. I had to figure that out myself.
Mhm.
So I started going online, just really going through all kinds of ways. And then I saw this retreat to know what your spiritual gifts are. And then the person who was leading the retreat, we look alike, we're like the same person, but it was her spirit.
And it's not your
And I was
twin.
just, yeah. And I was like, oh my God, this is it. So that was my second trip to Sedona to do this retreat. And then everything just unfolded there.
Wow.
Yeah, that
So
was the start.
to me, that's a leap, though. I know you wanted to follow that, but
Hmm.
I went out on my own back in '99. I had golden handcuffs trying to leave corporate America,
Yeah.
and it was tough. And
Yeah.
I was I was scared. And people say, how do you do that? How did you do that? So I know how I did it. I took the plunge. I just didn't know.
It was so much change happening. And because with the contract ending, I have to say that I'm always a saver. So it's like I say, I had enough money saved up to say, okay, I can do this for about a year, see if things turn around. But also at the same time, I went and got a real estate license. I said, let me try to become a real estate broker and see if that's going to work too. Like the jack of many trades. I did get my real estate license, and I said that could be where the money comes from as I try to figure out what my spiritual direction is. And it was during COVID, so nobody was working. And then I got a PPP loan because I had my own company. Everything was just really falling into place. I'll take this leap. And my fallback was I can always go back to corporate America. I'm not afraid to work for anybody else. I had my own company, and that was good. And it lasted as long as it needed to. And if I need to go work for someone else, I'll do that. But those doors closed.
Those doors, exactly. It's interesting what closes when you make that step into where you're
Exactly.
supposed to go. Everything just locks up. And that's interesting you said that. Same thing happened with me in my life. When I
Yeah.
went a certain way, there were still some things I wanted to hang on to.
Hmm.
And then it was like all those things got closed off, whether literally or internally, because I had a couple of things where I can't go back to that.
Yeah.
I just can't go back to that.
I have this crazy story. A friend of mine who was in corporate too, she was working for another company. She wanted me to work with her. She was a client of mine too. And so she was like, well, why don't you come and work with me at this company? I was like, okay. So I had a couple of interviews. And in my literally my last interview, I was this woman, and she was just starting a new role too, the one I was interviewing with. And we were talking, and all of a sudden, I saw this like black cloud near her, and the energy was really strong around it. And I had to ask her, this was the craziest thing. I would have never done this normally. Asked her, how do you feel about your job? I had to ask her that because there was some type of panic that I felt that was within her. And she did not know how to answer that question after I asked her that. And it was funny because my friend was keeping me updated after all interviews I had and said, okay, you're good. Until that last interview. That's when spirit showed me who I would have been working for if I would have gotten that job. It's someone who didn't really like the job she was in. And it was just this weird energy cloud that was around her. And I was stunned to have experienced that. And then I wasn't surprised that I didn't get the job. But I knew that was energy saying you don't belong here anymore. This is how you can read people. This is what you know from them. So you really have to understand what's going on with you right now.
Yeah, I hear you. It just brought me back when I went out on my own. I had an offer from another company. It was a part-time job, paid almost as much as my previous full-time job, company car, everything I could want, and all the time that I really needed to start my new business. So it was perfect. And I went to accept it. And the first day they wanted me to sign the paperwork, they said, why don't you come in and sit with the rest of the division that day? I went and sat in and listened to everything they were going through. And the longer I sat there, the more I went inside, I can't do this job.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this job. I can't. And they were already, at the end of the day, they said, we need to sign. I said, I'm sorry. I walked in this morning ready to sign. And after sitting here today, I can't. And their eyes went this big, what? You really put us in a terrible position. I said, would you rather me quit in 3 months? Because I promise you that's where this would go. I've never done this before. But in that moment, I knew I could not go back. There was no turning back for me. And at that moment, I really believe that anyone who gets into doing their own business, there's that moment when it's like, burn the ships behind you. And move forward. That's my motivation. I can't go back to that life because there's a bigger adventure in front of me.
That's true.
Yeah. And so you took the leap, you did it. And like you said, doors were closed behind you as you did it. And it actually gave you a comfort, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It did.
Yeah. That's why that came up for me, because even in that moment, I didn't want to let anyone down. But I knew that this wasn't right for me. It wasn't right for them. I just needed to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because change is always so hard at the same time. Even though I like newness and I like starting things over or just trying to accomplish something different, the comfort level that you have in the now is hard to let go. So you're struggling within yourself to say, okay, it is time to change, but can I really change?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, once you get to the other side, you're fine. But it's just that road that gets a little tough sometimes.
Yeah. And I also think that when we step out in that unknown, fear is there, and it's got to be there. And fear, one of the things I tell my clients, fear always distorts. So you never get a clear view until you step out into that fear, and then you start to see it's not as big as I thought it was.
Of course.
Or there are a lot of fears that, or they just live in here. They have nothing to do with reality.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't let fear stop you. You can accept your fear, but don't let it stop you from doing anything.
I love that, Janice. So Janice, what would you say to someone who's out there trying to figure out whatever it is, going from being maybe a at-home, stay-at-home person, mother, father, going out of the corporate world, or someone in corporate going out on their own? What would you say to someone with the struggles they're facing from your perspective?
I would say just try it. You can always go back to what you were doing before. It's like there's nothing wrong with just giving it a try and taking that leap. And what always helped me is having the fallback. Oh, I can always just do this. But I never went back. That was what the mental fallback was. And that is what gives you the strength to just move forward. And then also, don't really take care of yourself. Don't let any responsibility or let what you know or you think that people need from you stop you from doing anything, because I always said, I don't want to die with any regrets. I don't want to grow old with any regrets. I don't want to be 80 or 90 years old in a rocking chair saying, what if, or I wonder. I don't want to ever say that, because if a what if comes up, just do it. And that's what I would say to people.
I love that. Janice, thank you so much for being on the show. And everyone, thank you. If you'll click on like and follow, thank you for joining us for another shot of inspiration. Janice, so glad to have you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Shot of Inspiration. If you like this or any of our other episodes, make sure you rate it and share it with a friend. This is Greg Stevens, and we look forward to being with you next time. Until then, be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth.